So I think the problem has been solved now. Quite a number have been able to join. So let's continue from where we left, right? Okay. So it means that in terms of the recording, you would have this lecture in two recordings. So I will label them as A and B. So lecture 4A and then lecture 4B. Okay. So let's continue. So I think, Joshua, your problem has been solved now. So originally the supply function should have -1 here to indicate that at the price of 0, the producer is going to supply a negative quantity. Right. Okay. So let's continue from here. Um, so let's continue from here. So now we know that, well, we know all the three ways in which you can represent the law of supply. Right. So now let's move on to distinguish between individual supply and then market supply. So the same concepts as in the case of demand, right? So the market comprises of more than one supplier. There are a number of suppliers in the market, right? So in the same principle, if we are looking at the supply for just one seller, then it is the individual supply. But if we are looking at the supply for more than one seller in the market, then we are talking about the market supply. So it's the same way as in the case of demand, where the market demand is obtained by summing the individual demand horizontally. The market supply is also obtained by summing the individual supply horizontally. Right, and you can do that using the schedule. You can do that using the graph or even the equation. But like I said, the equation one, I don't want to do that here. So let's quickly look at how we can do that using the schedule. So again, on your screen, you see the table on the top of the graphs. On top of the graphs, that is the the supply schedule for two producers. So you can pick any price and then find the market supply at that price. And that is the horizontal summation of the individual supply. So if you pick one, as we did in the case of demand, that is the price of one, the market supply will be the sum of producer one's supply plus the sum, so the sum of producer one and two's supply at the market price of one. And that gives you 3, right? So you can do same for all other prices and then obtain the market supply for each price. So you can do same with the graph as well. So the graphs, you just pick the quantity supply at each price and then have a third graph, which is the supply, that is the market supply graph. So you just sum the individual supplies to obtain the market supply. So it's the same thing, right, as in the case of demand. Now, one feature or one thing we said in the case of demand is that the demand curve that's the market demand curve is more flatter than the individual demand curve. The same can be said here as well. The market supply curve is flatter than the individual supply curves, as we did in the case of demand. Right, so I can see someone's hand up. Let me go and check what the problem. So I have Kingsley. Kingsley, your hand is up. Go ahead, please.
Okay, sir, please, when we consider the market supply, realize that we use one price, that is 1.00. We have a situation where we use all the prices in the two schedules.
Kingsley, I don't know. I don't know if you look at that. If I understand you correctly, the one is just to at one price to show the horizontal summation, but we use all of them. So if you go to 1.5, for instance, check 1.5. At the price of 1.5, the first firm is supplying 2, and then the second firm is supplying 3. So when you add the 2, 3 plus 2 will give you 5 at 1.5. So that's what was used. The red lines is just to indicate to you that we just pick a point to explain that it is a horizontal summation. So we use all prices, just as in the case of demand. Does it make sense to you, Kingsley? Kingsley, you are unmuted. So, um, sorry, I've unmuted you. So,
Yes, please, I understand. Thank you.
so you get it now.
Yes, please.
Okay, all right. So that is the distinction between individual supply and then the market supply. Okay, so let's move on. So now let's look at the factors that influence supply for a product, just as we did in the case of demand, right? So from the laws of supply, I mean, we know that one factor that influences supply is the price of the product, right? Is the price of the product. Now, in addition to the price of the product, there are other factors that influences supply. Some of them are listed here. Again, note that these are not, or the list here is not exhaustive. There are some other factors that you can identify that I have not included here. But in most of our textbooks, we tend to focus on these ones, but it doesn't mean that these are the only factors that influences supply for a product. So there's a cost of production, there's the price of related products. We had the same in the case of demand, right? And there is also technology, there is changes in weather conditions and all that, right? So let's pick these ones one by one and let's see how they can influence supply for a product. So the cost of production, of course, includes the raw material cost, the labor cost, and any other input cost that the firm uses to produce the items that it supplies to the market. Now, if cost of production increases, if you are producing a particular product and the cost of production increases, what would happen is that you are likely to reduce the quantity supplied to the market, right? So if cost of production increases, supply decreases, right? So any factor or anything that will increase the cost of production for the firm would result in a reduction in supply. And then anything that reduces cost of production would result in an increase in supply. So there's one factor, for instance, that reduces cost of production, and that can also increase cost of production, which is the imposition of a tax. So, for instance, government can impose a tax on production. So, if a tax is imposed, it increases production cost, and therefore supply would reduce. If a tax is reduced, then the cost of production reduces, and therefore we are likely to see supply increasing. So that is how cost of production affect supply of a product. Okay. The next one is the price of related products, right? But the next one is the price of related products. Now, if you remember when we looked at demand, we had the same factor there determining demand. So the question is, are there differences? So yes, there are differences. Now let me qualify them here. So in the case of demand, it is price of related product in consumption in the case of demand. And then in the case of supply, it is price of related product in production. So price of related products in production in the case of supply. But in the case of demand, it's price of related products in consumption. Okay. So in the case of price of related product in production, we can distinguish between um, products that are substitute in production and those that are complement in production, just as in the case of demand. So in the case of demand, we had substitute in consumption and complement in consumption. So in the case of supply, it is substitute in production and then substitute complement in production. Now, when two products are substitute in production, it means that the producer can produce one or them in place of each other. So if I don't get to produce commodity A, my setup is such that I will be able to produce commodity B. So that's what we mean that the two products are substitute in production. I mean, two products are complement in production when the two are produced together. So producing one would result in the production of the other. So that's what we mean by they are complement in production, right? So if two products are substitute in production, then it means that when the price of one increases, that becomes more profitable to the producer. So the producer will shift resources to the production of that one. So you expect to see that the supply of the other one would decrease or would go down. So when two products are substitute in production, an increase in the price of one would result in a reduction in the supply of the other. If they are complement in production, then an increase in the price of one would result in this increase in the supply of the other as well. And the reason being that the two are produced together, and therefore, if the price of one increases, the producer is going to supply more of that, which implicitly means that more of the other is also produced. Right? So that is how the price of related products in production affect supply for a product. The next one is technology, which I think it's quite obvious. So if the technology is a productivity enhancing technology, right, technology that increases productivity, then we expect that if we have such a technology, the firm or the producer would supply more of the products to the market because the technology has improved its productivity. It can produce more with the same resources that it was using. Right? So an advancement in technology increases supply to the market. And then we have weather conditions. So particularly in the agricultural sector, for Ghana, for instance, where most of our agricultural activity is rain fed. So in the periods where the rains do not come, we are likely to see a reduction in supply for most agricultural products to the market. But when we have the rains, it rains very well, then of course you hear farmers saying that a lot has been supplied to the market. So that's how weather conditions affect the supply for a product. There are other factors that you can mention. The last time somebody mentioned COVID, for instance. So a pandemic can influence the supply for a product. And we can have location can also influence supply for a product. age can, gender and all that. Or some of these factors are factors that are not mentioned, but they are all factors that can influence the supply for a product. So I see some hands up. Let me go and check what is. So Kingsley, your hand is still up. I think it's the earlier one, so I am lowering it. Apart from Kingsley, I don't see any other hand up, but I can see somebody. Somebody wants explanation of technology. So therefore, I don't know. I think it's quite obvious, isn't it? When a technology is, um, we find, for instance, take a block manufacturing firm, for instance, someone who manufactures block, block for construction, and he has a machine that produces, let's say, 10 pieces of block at a time. And there's an innovation, technology comes that he can produce 100 pieces of block at the same time. So what does that technology do to his supply? It means that he can supply more to the market now compared to what he used to do earlier. Okay, so that's how technology influences supply. You can even think of initially when we used to use a typewriter to type things. Right now, there's a computer and more modern technology way of typing. What has that happened to, or how has that affected the supply of maybe secretarial services and all that? So technology, when it's imposed, particularly productivity enhancing technology, would increase supply for a product. I have some other. Somebody's asking whether a firm, what can you give an example of a firm that produces good in terms of substitute in production? You can even use Milo and Bonvita. Pick Nestle Ghana Limited, right? Judith, pick Nestle Ghana Limited, assuming that it produces Milo and Bonvita, supplies them. So it uses the same cocoa and all that. If the price of Bonvita goes up, it will produce more Bonvita to the market or sell more Bonvita in the market by reducing the supply of Milo. It's the same production technologies that are used, right? But there's even an example going forward. I'll show you on the slides. Um, yeah, I mean the the number of, so the population, put it this way, the number of sellers, right? Not the number of buyers. So Benjamin, I mean, if you want to analyze it in terms of population, say the number of sellers for a product. If the number of sellers increases, of course, supply would increase. Just as in the case of demand, we have the number of buyers. So you can explain it in that context. Okay, good. So now let's move on. So I've explained. So the explanation to these are here. Price of related group. So Judith, I think you asked the question. So there's example here, wheat and maize. So if you pick a farmer who can use the land to cultivate wheat or to cultivate maize. So these two are substitute in production. So I've explained this. Complement to, you can use sawdust and plywood. Right. So in coming up or in producing plywood, you end up with a byproduct which is sawdust. And therefore, if that is also sold, you know. So if you are producing more plywood, it means that more sawdust will be produced as well. So I've explained all this technology improvement and all that. So now, as we did in the case of demand, where we distinguish between change in supply and then changes in quantity supply, we are going change in demand and changes in quantity demanded. We are going to do the same thing for supply as well, right? So we will distinguish between a change in quantity supply and then a change in supply. Now, the explanations are the same as in the case of demand. So if the change is as a result of a change in the price of the item, then that is referred to as a change in quantity supplied. But if it is as a result of a change in other factors apart from the price of the product, then that is referred to as change in supply. You know, so it's the same thing as in the case of demand. I've seen someone with a hand up. David. Yeah, David, go ahead.
Say, please, the petrol and car, are they complementary goods?
Yeah, so in consumption, they are complementary. Right?
Hello.
So in consumption, they are complementary goods in consumption. So I hope that makes, so they are complementary in consumption, not in production. All right. So in production, in producing cars, we don't need petrol to produce cars. Or producing cars, it doesn't lead to the production of petrol. So if you are saying in consumption, then petrol and car are complementary in consumption. Okay, so I have another hand up, Belinda.
Okay,
Belinda, go ahead.
Sir, please, in complementary, let's take for example.
Belinda, we can't hear you at all. I cannot hear you at all.
Sir, can you hear me?
So you should increase
Hello?
your voice. Or is it possible to type if you can?
Okay, I think I'll do that.
And so type, then I can, because I can't hear you. It looks like it might be coming from you. Flour and bread are not no. So in producing bread, it doesn't lead to the production of flour. We use flour to produce bread. So flour is an input for the production of bread. See, it's if you are looking at the complement in substitute or in production, it is what we are saying is that we are looking at the output, what comes out, right? So I use flour to produce bread. So flour is an input in the production of bread, right? Unless you are saying that when you are producing bread, another product comes out. That is what we mean by complement, right? That's what we mean by complement. Okay, so now we are now going to look at the change in supply and then the change in quantity supply again. I haven't even done it. I don't know why somebody's asking me to go over it again. I'm yet to do it, please. So for instance, Erica, you have given a good example of complementary in production. In producing palm oil, you produce palm kernel as well, right? So that's a typical example of complementary in production. Right, so Erica. Torchlight and battery. So the torchlight and battery, they are complementary in consumption. Please do not confuse the term. They are complementary in consumption. So in using torchlight, you need battery to be able to use torchlight. But what we are discussing here is production. So in producing torchlight, we don't produce battery at the same time. The production of torchlight does not result in the production of battery. So look at the example Erica gave. The production of palm oil results in the production of palm kernel. So that's what we mean by complementary goods in production. Okay. When we say derived demand, so the demand in most cases is derived demand, right? So you consume the thing to gain satisfaction, right? So there is a consumption of the thing. So the demand for flour is a derived demand. The demand for bread is a derived demand. right? So you can look at it in that sense. Okay. So let's move on now. I have some few hands up. Okay, I have Rafiu. Rafiu, your hand is up. After these two, I'm not going to take any questions till I finish. Other than that, I'll waste more time. So Rafiu, go ahead, please.
Thank you, sir. I want to find out, just like my colleagues, PMX and then premix, as well as automotive gas oil, whether they are complementary
What do you
products.
what is PMS?
Petrol and premix.
Petrol and what? Premix.
As well as diesel.
Okay, so
yes,
let me
as well as
help
diesel.
you. Let me help you answer it. I'm not in the production of petrol and all that diesel. So, assuming you are aware of how petrol and stuff are produced, in producing petrol, does it lead to the production of diesel? A typical example, what I can say is that when I pick maybe liquefied LPG and petrol, in production of petrol, we produce LPG at the same time. That is complementary, right? In producing one product, it results in the production of another product. That is complementary. So think about it. In producing petrol, does it lead to the production of diesel? If it leads to the production of diesel, then you can say petrol and diesel are complementary. But if it doesn't, what it means that if you produce diesel, you can use the same processes to produce petrol. Then you can say they are substitute. So if I don't get to produce petrol, I can produce diesel. But if you are producing one product and it results in the production of another product, then the two products are complementary in production. Right?
Okay.
Yeah, okay. So
yes, sir. Then per your example, what it means is that petrol, LPG, and then premise are complementary products, because in producing petrol, it leads to the production of LPG as well as premix.
okay.
But
So
automotive gas oil is an entirely different process altogether.
Sure, if that is the case, thank you for that. I know that producing petrol will lead to the production of LPG. So the others, I'm not an energy expert. I'm an economist, Rafiu. So if that's
okay, I am an energy person. That's why I'm trying to find further.
All right.
Yes.
All right, that's fine then. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Sure. I said I was not going to take questions, but I have some chat here. Yeah, so somebody, I don't know what you mean, Parkwesi. So, say, what about in the production of cars? I don't know what you mean by that. Somebody's asking, what about palm wine and local gin? In producing palm wine, does it lead to the production of local gin? Because I know palm wine is just the types, they use palm tree and they get it from there. In producing it, I don't think it leads to the production of local gin. Palm wine probably is used to produce local gin, but it doesn't mean that when I'm producing palm wine, I get local gin from that. So please don't be confused with this explanations. So yeah, somebody has given another example: beef and hide. So the hide is what the leather, isn't it? Yes. So when you kill the animal, if you want to get more beef, that means you get more hide. So that's complementary. Because someone said car and fuel are complementary in consumption, not in production. Okay, so if it is demand, then Belinda, complementary in consumption, yes. Okay. Parkwesi, is car and fuel complementary in what? If it is complementary in consumption, then yes, demand, but not in production. All right, okay. So let's move on now. Okay, so I'm not taking any question on this thing anymore. Okay, so let's move on to the discussion to distinguish between change in quantity, the supply, and then the change in supply. So like I was saying, same thing as in the case of demand, right? So changes in quantity supply is as a result of a change in the price of the product. And then for a change in supply is as a result of a change in any other factor that influences supply for a product. So I will just switch to a whiteboard to explain this for you. Or, I mean, what we have here should be able to do that for us, right? So a change in supply can be an increase in supply or a decrease in supply, right? So if it is an increase in supply, the supply curve will shift to the right. And by the nature of the supply curve, when we say it shifts to the right, it comes down. Right? The supply curve shifts to the right, comes down. And then if it is a decrease in supply, it will shift to the left. So the left will be up. Right? It shifts it to the left, and then the supply curve goes up. That means it's a reduction in supply. Right? So let me just quickly switch to the whiteboard to provide a further explanation on this. So we have this as our supply curve where you have price here and then you have quantity here. And this is our upward sloping supply curve. So assuming that price is, say, let's say 10, and then the quantity supply is 20. And then price goes to, let's say, 15. And then the quantity supply rises to, let's say, 40. So the change here from 20 to 40 is referred to as a change in quantity supplied, because that is as a result of a change in the price of the product. So change in quantity supplied, right? A change in quantity supplied. Okay. And so that represents a movement along the supply curve. So you move from point A to point B, right? So that is a movement along the supply curve. But if it is a change in supply, then that is as a result of a change in any other factor that influences supply apart from the price of the item. So I have P here, and then I have quantity here. So this is upward sloping, S supply 0. So if it is something that increases supply, then it will shift the supply curve to the right. So this is an increase in supply, right? This represents an increase in supply. So this is an increase. So that's an increase in supply. But if it is something, so an example of a factor that can cause this, or a scenario that can cause an increase in supply, assuming there's a reduction in cost of production. If there's a reduction in cost of production, then the supply curve will shift to the right, indicating an increase in supply. But if there is an increase in cost of production, then the supply curve will shift to the left, upward, this way, indicating a reduction or a decrease. So this will represent a decrease in supply, right? So please take note of that. So some factors that can increase supply are improvement in technology, better weather conditions, reduction in cost of production, and also a reduction in price of a related commodity that are substitutes in production, right? And or if they are complement in production, you are likely to see that the supply curve will shift to the right. So those are the differences, right? And it's just similar to the case of demand. Just similar to the case of demand. So on the screen, you just see exactly the graphs of what I've just explained. So if it's a reduction in supply, the supply curve shifts to the left. It shifts upward. And if it's a decrease in supply, sorry, an increase in supply, the supply curve shifts downward to show an increase in supply. So change in quantity supply versus change in supply, as I've explained, the same thing, right? So now we are ready to combine the two sides of the market. Okay, so the question posed at this point is, what are the factors that determines, or how are prices of items that we see out there determined? How are prices determined? And the answer is that the price of any commodity is determined, I mean, particularly in a free market system, is determined by the forces of demand and then supply, right? So, I mean, when you see prices going up, it is actually the forces of demand and supply that is making that happen. You know, if prices are coming down, it is the same thing, right? So it is the forces of this demand and supply that combines to produce the prices of the items that you see there. Now, in the market, we have what we call equilibrium price and quantity. When we put the two together, equilibrium price and quantity. And what are these? So a market is said to be in equilibrium when what consumers are willing and able to buy is equal to what producers are willing and able to supply at a given price, right? So a market is said to be in equilibrium when what producers are willing to sell is equal to what consumers are willing to buy. And the equilibrium determines the equilibrium price and quantity. So in equilibrium, demand is equal to supply. So what you see on your screen is a market equilibrium which occurs at price equal to 1. So we have combined the supply side and then the demand side of the market. So a market is in equilibrium at the point where the demand curve cuts the supply curve. That is the market equilibrium. Now on this diagram, we see that that equilibrium point happens at the price of 1. Okay, so in reality, if you want to observe whether a market has reached equilibrium, you tend to see that prices is stable at that point for a very long time, right? Prices tends to be stable at that point for a very long time. But of course, that is not the case. We see that price fluctuates in the market. And when prices are fluctuating, it means that it is a force of demand and supply that is causing that. Either supply is increasing, demand is increasing, or both are changing at the same time. And that causes the fluctuations in the prices of the goods and services that you see out there. But if the price remains like that for a very long time, you want to say that the market probably is in equilibrium at that point. So this is what you see, right? So on your screen, you see the equilibrium point. So at every equilibrium point, there is an equilibrium price and also equilibrium quantity, right? At every equilibrium point, there's an equilibrium price and also an equilibrium quantity. Okay. So the question asked at this point is that, does market equilibrium remains the same forever? So what we are saying is that if assuming that this is the market for a particular commodity and the equilibrium price is 1, does 1 remain the same forever? And the answer is no. There are situations where the market, that is the actual price of the market, is not the equilibrium price, right? And if that happens, how does the market returns to equilibrium, right? So let's look at two scenarios. One is where the actual price, that is the market price, is greater than the equilibrium price. And then the second scenario will be where the actual price is lower than the equilibrium price. And let's see what happens in the market. Okay. So let's start with the first scenario. I mean, the equilibrium point can be calculated mathematically as well. So all you need to do is that if you have the demand function, you equate it to the supply function and solve for either P or Q. And that will give you the equilibrium conditions for that will give you the equilibrium price and also the equilibrium quantity. So you can solve it mathematically to obtain the equilibrium price and quantity. So that's what you see on your screen. This is very, very simple equation. So now let's go to the point I was making. So the first scenario, if the market price is above the equilibrium price. So in the case of what you see on your screen, assuming that the market price is 1.5, and we know that equilibrium price is 1. So at the market price of 1.5, something is happening there. We see that the supply of the good is greater than the demand for the product. So at the price of 1.5, supply is greater than demand at the price of 1.5. So if that is the case, then we have what we call the excess supply of the market. I mean, excess supply in the market. In other words, there is a surplus of the product in the market. Right? So producers have supplied more than what consumers can purchase. Right. So if that happens, there's an adjustment that is going to take place in the market. As long as 1.5 is not the equilibrium, an adjustment is going to take place. And how does the adjustment work? So producers have more products than what is demanded. Producers want to sell the product. Then the only way they can get consumers to purchase the product is start bringing prices down, right? So what we will see is that the excess supply that has been created here will result in a situation where prices will start falling, right? And I mean, the speed of adjustment depends on a number of factors anyway. Some adjustment can be very quick, some adjustment will take a while, right? So, but what we know is that in the end, an adjustment will be made such that market reaches its equilibrium again. So as price falls, the excess supply keeps on reducing. Anytime there's a reduction in price, you see that it shrinks the excess supply. Anytime there's a reduction in price, the excess supply shrinks, and it goes on to the point where now you have demand being equal to supply, and the market would have gotten back to equilibrium, right? So if actual market price is greater than the equilibrium price, over time, prices will fall to the equilibrium price through what Adam Smith called the invisible hands, right? So you don't see that the forces of demand and supply are working, but in the end, you see that a lot have changed in the market, that prices are restored to their equilibrium. The same way, if the actual market price is below the equilibrium price, if it's below the equilibrium price, then we have a situation of an excess demand. So let me get that one for you. So this is the case for the situation where actual market price is below the equilibrium price. So the equilibrium price is 1 in this case, but the actual market price is, let's say, 0.75. So at that point, you see that quantity demanded will be greater than quantity supply, and that creates what we call the excess demand in the market. Now, this excess demand would work in the market such that market would work itself back to equilibrium. So now how does this work? Now, once there's excess demand, you see that consumers would motivate producers with higher prices in order to get the commodity because there isn't enough of the commodity. So consumers will be motivating, will incentivize producers that, okay, you sell it to me at a price that is slightly higher, I will pay because I need it and there is excess demand for it. So this process will continue. Price will keep on changing. But in this case, in the upward trend, prices will go up to the point where equilibrium is now restored at the price of 1. So that is what happens through the market forces. Note that this is a free market system where there is no government intervention. So the market itself is working itself back to equilibrium. Now, like I said, the speed of adjustment to equilibrium point depends on a number of factors, right? Some markets might have a slower adjustment process. Some might have a very quick adjustment process to the equilibrium point. Okay, so that is what happens when there's, so this is actually what happens in the market when you see prices are fluctuating. Price go up, I mean, and then keeps on going up, and then at some point you see that it's become stable, and therefore it will be like that for a while, for a very long time, until something else happens, and then prices start what changing again. Okay, so this is what comes to play when it comes to the fluctuation in prices, right? Okay, I have a hand up and then a question. So somebody is still asking questions about complementary. Yeah, so you can interpret it to be that if the two uses the same raw material, right, confidence. So if they use the same raw material, then in producing one, it results in the production of the other. So that could be correct. So I have a hand up. Kingsley, your hand is up, please. Go ahead.
So please, in a typical market situation where the actual price in the market is lower than the equilibrium price.
Kingsley, your line is very bad. And because you have
Can you hear
feedback
me?
behind you, I don't know, are you using two devices? If you're using two devices, that's how come we are getting feedbacks. So please put one off. Or better still, you can type your question, please. Okay. So I have unmuted you, Kingsley. Put one of your device off.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
All right. So I want to ask, in a typical market situation where the actual price in the market is lower than the equilibrium price, what are some of the factors that we can consider, or some of the things that can happen for the market price to shift back to equilibrium?
Oh, Kingsley, your line is really bad. I can't hear you. I cannot hear you at all. If you can come again. I've unmuted you. Come again, because I can't hear you. And better still, if
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. So
I
when
want
you're
to
speaking,
ask,
just
in a
take your
typical
time.
market
Then
situation
yeah.
where the actual price in the market is lower than the equilibrium price, what are some of the factors that we can consider, or some things that can happen for the price to move back to the equilibrium price?
Okay. So now there is a phenomenon that is happening in Ghana now. I don't know if you guys are experiencing it. You are seeing, or we are seeing situations where prices of items are going up. now. Most items, prices are going up, right? So as long as the price is not stable, then it just tells you that the market is not in equilibrium. So if you have situations where prices are going up, then it's just telling you that the price that has been dictated by the markets as of now is not the equilibrium price, which is lower. So we are having shortages, and as a result of that, you see prices going up. Particularly, take example in the building industry, construction industry. Prices of building materials are skyrocketing. Cement prices are going up. Iron rods are going up. Nails, all that, they are going up. And that's a clear case example of a situation where the price that is being detected by the market is lower than the equilibrium price. So this will continue up to the point where prices become stable. And if they are stable for a while, then you want to say that that price is possibly an equilibrium point. But that price can change again, right? Depending on the forces of demand and supply, which we are going to discuss in the next slide. So what changes the equilibrium price and quantity? Right, that's what we are going to discuss next. So I have another hand up, Joshua. So Joshua, you are unmuted.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So
Yes.
please, I needed clarity. I'm sure you have answered it already, but I needed clarity on before a price. You said earlier that that for us to say that a market is at equilibrium, that is a free market. You would have to say that the price is equal to, that is the quantity supplied, it will be equal to the demand. So,
Yeah.
sir, I wanted to ask, I needed clarity on that. When would before there will be excess demand and there will be excess supply in the market, when
Yeah.
actually does it best fit for us to say that, oh, we have gotten to the place where we can say that, oh, this is equilibrium?
Yeah, so that's why I'm saying that if you observe the market and you see that prices are stable, the price of the item is stable for a very long time, then you want to say that at that price is an equilibrium price, right? So an
Yes, sir.
equilibrium price is a market clearing price, is a point of rest. So you stay there for a long time. Sometimes it stays for a long time, but it doesn't mean that that remains the same forever. There are forces of demand and supply that changes these equilibrium prices, right? So if an equilibrium price is, let's say, 1 cedi this month, it might not necessarily remain 1 cedi in 2 months or in 3 months' time. Forces of demand and supply can change that equilibrium price. And I'm saying that that's the next thing we are going to do, right?
Okay, sir.
Yeah, so you can observe the market,
Thank you.
and if you see that a particular price has remained like that for a very long time, for a while, you can say that that probably was an equilibrium price, right? So you can observe the market
Thank
for
you,
a
sir.
while, and then you can use that to show that that was an equilibrium price. Yeah, so I hope that explains your point, Joshua. I have Johnson. Johnson has the hand up. Johnson, please go ahead.
Yes, sir. Sir, please, I want to find out if there is any relationship between the equilibrium price and then the minimum wage, please.
Okay, so we will get there, Johnson.
Okay,
There
sir.
is price controls that we are going to look at. So we'll get there
Okay.
once we are done with this. Okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. Okay, so let me see. There are some few questions in there. So somebody saying that in market equilibrium, can we give an example of a disposable nose mark where the price fell when supply was more than demand? Yeah. So if you remember, the pandemic caused the the demand for nose marks to increase, and at the same time, supply also went up over time. I mean, in the long run, we had supply increasing. Okay, so in the short run, demand was quite high, and that led to an increases in the price of nose marks, right? So that caused a disequilibrium. But when supply started increasing, right, you have a situation where prices start falling, and then maybe now it has come to a resting point where they are all selling at the same price for quite a long time now. The same thing with the hand sanitizer issue, right? So sanitizers were sold at a particular price, a stable point. When you go to any pharmacy, you're going to buy either for 10 cedis or 7 cedis. But the pandemic caused an increase in demand for it. And that led to a situation where prices started going up, but it has come to a point where it has what? Rest. So if you take your time, the next thing I'm going to do is to explain that, right? That's what we are going to use the exclusion. And so I think I've just made a point now, isn't it? Somebody's asking the question about whether the nose mark has equilibrium has been restored in that market, right? So and now prices are stable, isn't it? So you can say we are in a okay. So in the case, okay, so somebody is asking whether why why a reduction in petrol prices does not lead to a reduction in lorry fare. So the argument the drivers make is that their cost of production is not made up of only petrol. So the reason why they do not reduce prices when petrol prices go up is that they also believe that there are other things that increases their cost. The price of car tire, the price of spare parts and all that. But there's a point I want you to note that in Ghana, particularly developing countries, prices are not flexible downwards. Once the price go up, it is very difficult to come down. So they are what we call sticky. Prices are sticky downwards. They are not flexible. But the argument that I'm telling you, the argument that the lorry drivers or the drivers make is that petrol is not the only items that goes into their cost of production. Other things goes there. So if the prices of those are not coming down, they will not reduce prices. So Abrapa, I hope I've answered your question. So somebody, Kingsley is asking, so I think Kingsley, I've answered it. If price is below the equilibrium price, there will be excess demand, right? As long as the excess demand is in the market, prices will rise automatically. If a lot of people are demanding the product and there isn't enough, the little that comes, producers increase the price, you know. So prices go up automatically when there is excess demand. It will only stop when now the market has cleared and you have demand being equal to prices. So the phenomenon you see out there, particularly now that the nose marks example that somebody mentioned. So when the pandemic started, so there was an increase in demand for nose marks. So there was excess demand. That's why prices were going up. But over time, supply increases to actually meet the excess demand. And now what do we see? So the price is not where it used to be before. It is up, but it's now a stable price. Right. Yeah, so somebody is asking, Gladys is asking, equilibrium is where there is no shortage. And yes, at the equilibrium point, there is no shortage, there is no surplus. Demand is equal to supply at the equilibrium point. Somebody is asking whether the supply curve can be a vertical line. Yes, it can be. We will discuss that when we are doing elasticity. Those are the extreme cases that we'll be considering when we come to elasticity. Okay. So now let's move on to discuss what causes equilibrium price and quantity to change. So what causes equilibrium price and quantity to change? And the answer to that question, we can look at it from three perspectives. One is to look at only the demand side, and the other one is to look at only the supply side, and then the third one is to look at the combination of the two, right? So it is the forces of demand and supply that combines to change the equilibrium price and quantity in the market, right? So those are the three scenarios that we are going to look at. One, we will be looking at the case of only demand changing, and two, we'll be looking at the case of only supply changing, and three, we'll look at the case of both changing at the same time. So let's quickly look at them. So let's first of all start with the case of only demand changing. And I'm going to explain that with a scenario. And this scenario is that studies have shown that tap water is unsafe, right? So we want to analyze the effect of this on the market for bottled water, right? So let me switch to a whiteboard to explain this. So this is the market for bottled water. So let's get a market for bottled water. So this is the price, and then this is the quantity for bottled water, and this is the demand for bottled water, and this is the supply for bottled water, and these are the equilibrium. So this is the equilibrium for bottled water, and this is the price, the equilibrium price for bottled water. So you are told that a study have shown that drinking tap water is not safe, right? Drinking tap water is not safe. So what is the effect of this on the market for bottled water? Clearly, you see that this is a factor that is going to affect the demand for bottled water. So as long as it's not price, it means that it's going to shift the demand for bottled water. So if studies are showing that tap water is not safe, then people are not going to drink tap water, then they are going to drink bottled water. So therefore, you expect the demand for bottled water to shift to the right. So you have this, right? Now, if this happens, let's see what is, now look for the new equilibrium point. This is a new equilibrium point. So you have now you have a higher equilibrium quantity and also a higher equilibrium price, right? So you have a higher equilibrium quantity and then a higher equilibrium price, right? So one would ask, what caused the equilibrium price to increase? And also what caused the equilibrium quantity to go up? Now, the reason why equilibrium price went up is that when the research was published, or when study shows that the tap water is not safe, the demand for bottled water again, like I said, shifts to the right. Now, if that happens, you see that at the initial equilibrium price, demand for bottled water is greater than supply for bottled water at this point, right? So you clearly see that this is now the demand curve, and this is still the old supply curve. But assuming that this is still the price that the bottled water is sold, you see that demand for bottled water will be greater than supply for bottled water. And this is what is going to kick the adjustment. It will work just the same as price being below the equilibrium price. So it means that there will be excess demand or a shortage. So there will be excess demand for bottled water, right? And it is this excess demand that will force, or that will cause the price of bottled water to rise to the new equilibrium point of P2, right? So this is a typical example of how prices are determined in the market using the forces of demand and supply. right? How prices are determined in the market using the forces of demand and supply. So a market is in equilibrium and then there's a shock. In this example, is a demand shock, which is coming from the fact that tap water has been found to be unsafe. If that is the case, then it is going to increase the demand for bottled water. So the demand curve for bottled water shifts to the right. If it shifts to the right, then it means that at the initial price that the item is being sold in the market, there is excess demand for it. Right? And once excess demand sets in, prices will start adjusting. So prices will start going up, 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 up. When does it stop? It will only stop when now demand is back, or demand is now equal to supply, and that is when it will stop. So you see that the equilibrium price will be higher, and then the quantity will also be higher because now suppliers have supplied more to the market in order to take advantage of the what do you call it, the excess demand. Okay, so that is one example. Another example would be, so for instance, assuming that you are told that consumers income increases and the good is a normal good. Let me get another example. So assuming that it is still the same market for bottled water, right? And this is the demand for bottled water, and this is the supply for bottled water. So this is the equilibrium price for bottled water, and then this is the quantity. So you are told that the income of consumers have gone up, and consumers see bottled water as a normal good. So it means that given that bottled water is a normal good, the demand curve for bottled water will shift to the right, right? So you have this one. So the same principles here. At the original equilibrium price, demand will be greater than supply. So there is excess demand for bottled water, which will shift, or which will cause the price to increase to the new equilibrium point, right? Okay. So I think that is the only example for here, but you can look at it from here. So the same thing here. So with tap water unsafe, demand for bottled water changes. The demand for bottled water increases, the demand curve shifts to the right. What are the new equilibrium price and quantity and how they change? So that is what you see here. Right. So this is what explains it. Okay, so this is one of the things that can cause a price change in the market. So if you pick the market for a product, right, this is one of the the things that can cause price to change in the market, coming from the demand side. Okay. Now let's look at the case for the supply side, or this is another example for the demand side. Assuming that there is the shock is that we have a new 0-calorie sports drink is invented. It's invented, right? So in the market for bottled water, so the new drink serve as what? A substitute, right? It serves as a substitute, and that drink is cheaper. Is there okay? Let me say that it serves as a substitute. So what will happen is that the demand for people will switch to go and buy that one. So the demand for bottled water will decrease. And if demand for bottled water decreases, the demand curve will shift to the left. And if it shifts to the left, you see the problem that will be created now will be the excess supply. And if there is excess supply, you expect that the price would fall. Right? So you find a new equilibrium price being lower than the initial equilibrium price that you have. Okay, so now we cannot, it's all about you understanding how the curve will shift either to the right or to the left, and then you can use that to analyze the effect of that on the market. So that one I cannot teach you everything. So that's why we've gone through the factors that influences demand, and the factors that influences supply. So you should be able to tell that this scenario, what has happened, it is a demand curve that will shift to the right or the supply curve that will shift to the left. Whatever happens, you should be able to tell us that, of course, this event or this shock that has happened will shift the demand curve to the right or will shift it to the left. It's up to you. You have to be able to do that. The scenario, so you need to understand the factors that influences demand very well to be able to tell that a change in this will lead to an increase in demand or will lead to a reduction in demand. So it's you have to learn that on your own, right? Okay. So now let me quickly look at the effect of a supply, that for a supply, right? I still have about 10 minutes or so. So that for supply. So the same principles, they work the same way, right? So in the case of supply, what will be changing or the curve that will be shifting is the supply curve. So either shifts to the right or shift to the left. So there's an example here, we are still looking at the market for bottled water. So the shock is that European water bottlers buy springs and open plants in Ghana. So there is one more producer of bottled water. And if that happens, what you see is that the supply for bottled water is going to increase. So the supply curve for bottled water will shift to the right, right? So if that happens, then you know that you can now analyze it. So this is what will happen. So because a plant has been acquired, they have purchased another factory that can produces bottled water has come into existence. You see that the supply for bottled water will shift to the right. And if that happens, in the end, the new equilibrium will be a fall in equilibrium price, right? So to explain that, use what is happening at the initial equilibrium. At the initial equilibrium, you see that there will be excess supply for the product. And as long as there's excess supply, price will fall and the price falls to this. So note that if there's excess supply, price will fall. If there's excess demand, price would increase. So please take note of that. So that is there. And then the last example here is for a reduction in supply. So there's a drought that dries up water in Ghana. So there's going to be a decrease in the supply of bottled water. So the supply curve for bottled water will shift to the left. And if it shifts to the left, what happens? Let's see, there's going to be excess demand at this point. So demand will be greater than supply at the initial equilibrium price. So once there's excess demand, then like I said, you expect to see equilibrium price going up. And that is what goes up there. So different scenarios can be provided for you. You have to know how the curves will shift, depending on the scenario that is provided for you, whether it is demand that will be affected or the supply that will be affected, and even in what direction will the two shifts. And then the last one is where we want to look at where both demand and supply changes at the same time, right? So in that sense, we can have three scenarios here as well. Now, this is what I want you to go and analyze on your own. When both demand and supply changes, there are instances where the effect on equilibrium price is not certain. It can go up, it can remain the same, or it can even come down. And also there are instances where the equilibrium price equilibrium quantity, the effect is also not certain. It can go up, it can remain the same, or it can even reduce. Okay. Now, all I will tell you here is that the effect of a change in both demand and supply depends on the magnitudes of the changes, right? It depends on the magnitude of the changes, whether the change in demand is greater than the change in supply, or the change in supply is greater than the change in demand. Those are the two scenarios you can consider. So you can generate a lot of graphs under the situation where the two changes at the same time, right? But like I was saying, the effect on the market will depend on the magnitudes of the changes, whether the change in demand is greater than the change in supply, or the change in supply is greater than the change in demand, right? So there's an example here. So this is what, if you look at this, so in this case, we are looking at a case where demand increases, and then we also look at the case where supply increases at the same time. Now, in this diagram, you see that equilibrium price remains the same, but equilibrium quantity increases. Then the only way you can have this answer is because the change in demand is the same as the change in supply. So we are looking at a situation where both supply and demand increases, but they all increase in the same magnitude. They all increase by the same magnitude, right? That is what will give you this answer. So what I want you to do is that at your own leisure time, practice it. Shift both demand and supply to the left, sorry, to the right. But in one scenario, make sure that the shift in demand is greater than the shift in supply. So let me just use a whiteboard to explain that scenario to you. So let's just go to a whiteboard to explain that scenario. So I am cleaning this whiteboard. So this is the demand, and then this is the supply. So this is our initial equilibrium price and quantity. So in this case, both demand and supply are increasing, but the increase in demand, so this is demand 1, and then demand 2. And this is the increase in supply. So you see that the increase in supply is smaller than the increase in demand. What do we see? We see that equilibrium price will go up, and then the equilibrium quantity will also go up, right? So this is a situation where the increase in demand is greater than the increase in supply. Then you also have the other scenario where the increase in demand is lower than the increase in supply. So let me also show you that scenario. So we have our equilibrium price. So the increase in demand, I'm shifting the demand by a very small margin. So this is the increase in demand by a small margin. And then we have the increase in supply by a bigger margin. So this is the increase in supply by, so what do we see? We see that equilibrium price will fall, but the equilibrium quantity will also rise. So that is it. So in a case when the two shift at the same time, then you have these different scenarios where you need to discuss that the effect on equilibrium price and quantity will be dependent on the magnitudes of the shift, right? It will be dependent on the magnitude of the shift. And then yes, so this is the case where they are all shifting by the same what do you call it, quantity, by the same magnitude. So let me look at the other situation. So again, this one, they all reduce by the same magnitude, right? If they all reduce by the same magnitude, you see that equilibrium price remains the same, but the equilibrium quantity falls, right? And then you can look at the case where the magnitudes are different. So, well, in fact, this is also the case where they all they change in different direction. So demand decreases, supply increases, but in the same magnitude. Then in that sense, you see that equilibrium price will fall, but equilibrium quantity remains. That is also another scenario you can consider. So the point I want to make here is that in a case where the two lines change at the same time, there are different scenarios that can result, right? There are different scenarios that can result from that. Now here, I mean, as a lecturer, I can't do much for you here. You have to go and sit down and practice them. Draw the diagrams, on a sheet of paper, and look at these scenarios. You just assume that, okay, the change in demand is greater than the change in supply, and they are all changing in the same direction, or they are changing in different directions. Use these things to come up with the results using these interesting scenarios. Okay. All right. So I would want to end the class here. I want to have another class with you on Sunday. I will liaise with the class rep to tell you the exact time on Sunday for us to finish the market. So we'll discuss the issue of price controls, where we have the minimum wage that somebody asks. So we have what we call the price ceiling and price floor. We will discuss that. And then we will now move on into the concept of elasticity. Mind you, your interim assessment is likely to be next week, and it's going to cover the concept of elasticity. So I want to start this Sunday, and then by next week, Friday, we'll be done. So you'll be ready to do your interim assessment, which is going to be a multiple choice questions on Sakai, all things being equal. Okay, so I've seen some messages in our chat dialogue. Let me just check what those messages are. Yeah, so the number has gone down. I don't know, maybe is their internet or what? They get logged off and cannot rejoin the meeting. Yeah, so I noticed it too. So I don't know what is happening. It's actually, I don't think it's my fault. Yeah, so somebody's asking I make the meeting after. Yeah, I will definitely communicate that to the class rep, and then yeah, so the IA is going to be multiple choice questions and it's going to be on Sakai. The date and time will be communicated to you. Note that you will only have just a window to go and do it, and you'll be given 2 chances to take it. And that window, you have to do it within that period. If you don't do it, then I'm sorry, you'll not be given any marks for it. Okay, so for those who were logged off, this has been recorded, so I will make the recordings to the class rep, in fact, immediately, so that those who did not get opportunity to stay through the class would have the opportunity to listen to the recordings. All right, so I think I will end here and then continue on Sunday with you, all things being equal. So have a good evening. Enjoy the rest of the day. Bye-bye.